oversight and implementation hearing that our budget subcommittees and policy committees on public safety are having this year. This one is on the drug contraband interdiction pilot program that is being implemented in California's prison system. We are, of course, we all share the goal of doing everything we can do to eliminate illegal drugs, cell phones, and other contrabands in our state prisons. To that end, after 2 years of discussion in Budget Subcommittee 5 and Budget Subcommittee 3 on the Assembly, we spent a lot of time discussing how this could be done in the best possible way. These discussions culminated in the language found in Penal Code 6402. And while we've been able to read some of those regulations, this is an opportunity to hear from the department directly about the effectiveness of the pilot program and how it is progressing. I especially want to thank Secretary Beard for being here today. I know that this is one of his priorities, and I'm hopeful that we can work together to eliminate illegal contraband in our prisons, provide inmates with much-needed substance abuse treatment and education, and also ensure that the rights of all people involved in the project are protected. The pilot program should be even-handed and does include visitors, staff, contractors, volunteers, and purveyors of goods and services. We also need to make sure that it treats all people involved with respect. And as many of you know, my particular concerns relate to the use of dogs, which have been in many parts of the country and the state iconic symbols of potential misuse of police power, and also strip searches, which without proper training and appropriate officer conduct can become opportunities for humiliation and harassment. That is not the intent of these policies, I know that. But we need to make sure that we have the checks and balances so that they do not intrude into practice. Secretary Beard, I would really like to thank you again. And ask you to start by giving us a frame for the discussion of this issue. If you could just take 10 or 15 minutes to describe the pilot program, its goals, its procedures, and how it will be evaluated, we'd be very grateful. Welcome to the committee.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Wait, can I just ask? Also, like the chair of the Budget Subcommittee in the Assembly, Reggie Jones Sawyer, to ask if he has any opening comments he would like to make.
And actually, I'll make it real quick because I definitely want to hear from Secretary Beard. You and I have talked about this subject. And in fact, I think we both share that this should be the #1 priority as far as a way we can ensure that the incarceration rates go down. This is one of the reasons why we have recidivism. And I think you and I both share that. And I can assure you, while the Senate and Assembly and sometimes Republicans and Democrats, we look at business a certain way. We all want it to prosper a certain way. This is one business we want to go out of business in state penitentiary system right now. And so I know you've had expertise back east that you want to use. Hopefully we can marry the two, what's going on here in California, so that we can eradicate that as best we can. Because I think ultimately, as you've told me, we can have a safer, better educated, and better outcome when we have people leave our prison system.
Yeah. Would any other members of the committee like to make any comments? Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for having me here today and giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about drug interdiction. And I'd like, before I get into the pilot program, I'd like to just go back and talk about how I became aware of the problem in the prison system here. 4 years ago, I came here as a consultant and went to about 8 institutions looking at their lockdowns and modified programs, because they were doing a lot of them back then, and they wanted some outside eyes to take a look at what was happening. Every prison I went to, the staff told me, the warden and the staff in those prisons, that drugs were readily available in every prison. During the ensuing 2 years as a consultant, I went to more prisons and ended up going to maybe 14 or 15 of the prisons, and again was told the same thing by the warden and the staff in those prisons. I then took over 2 years ago as the secretary, and I've now visited all the prisons multiple times. I've talked to wardens, I've talked to the executive staff, I've talked to line staff, I've talked to inmates, and it's pretty much across the board. Everybody will tell you that drugs are readily available in all of the prisons in California. There's whole bunches of reasons why that's not a good thing. First of all, it drives the violence in the prison system. Assaults on staff, assaults on inmates, fights. California, as you may know, historically has one of the highest homicide rates in the country. And part of what drives that homicide rate is the drugs and the gangs in the prison system here. California also has a rate of suicides among their inmates, which is above what the national average is. And again, some of those suicides relate to drug debts, to fighting over drugs and the like. And we also have a considerable amount of overdose deaths, which go directly to the illegal drugs. It also, number two, one of the big things you all want me to do is reduce the recidivism rate. And I can't reduce the recidivism rate if we don't have a conducive environment for programming. And when you have drugs rampant in the prisons, and I was just at a prison not long ago where an inmate who had been in for 30 years, he told me, he said, you know, I've been in all your programs that you've had. Didn't get a whole lot out of it because I was high every time in all the programs that you had here, because drugs are here, and if you really want to make a difference, you've got to get the drugs out. Drugs also lead to the modified programs and lockdowns that I talked about, and while we've greatly reduced them, they still occur, and they still prevent people from going to programs on a consistent basis. The third reason to get the drugs out of the prison system is that it isn't very good to have inmates that come in, use drugs the whole time they're here, and walk out high. And I've been told when down in San Diego County, they have a place where they take everybody that comes out of the prison system directly from there through the place, they drug test them. 20-some% of them are hot coming out of our prisons. So how do we expect recidivism rates to go down with that kind of a thing going on? And then the final reason that we really need to do this is the visitors. You know, every weekend we arrest 3, 4, 5, and more people. And generally they're women. They're the mothers, they're the girlfriends, they're the wives, and they feel compelled, they feel threatened to bring it in. Either their loved one says they're threatened and you've got to bring the drugs in because I have a drug debt, or they feel somehow threatened. And so we're arresting a bunch of women, and we don't really want to arrest a bunch of women. I just want to stop the drugs from coming in the prisons. And it even goes beyond that because it affects the children. 2 weeks ago, we had a lady arrested bringing drugs in, and then her 2 young children were turned over to Child Protective Services. What are those children, I mean, I don't know what those children feel being taken away from their mother, but certainly it's not a good thing. Last year, we had an infant almost die because drugs were smuggled in the infant's diaper, and he got opiate poisoning. And we know that because when he got to the hospital and they treated him and life-flighted him to another hospital and they did the testing, you know, they found that out he had opiates in his system, and then we found drugs in the diaper bag when we went back and searched the thing. So the reasons to stop this are many. And why do I think we can be successful? Because I did come from Pennsylvania. I worked there for 38 years. The last 10, I was the secretary there. And in 1995, 20 years ago, we put in place a comprehensive drug interdiction program. And that program was along the line similar to what we're doing here in California. It used ion scan machines, and it used dogs and increased searching in the institutions. Also included a treatment component, and then a component to monitor everything. And we did some initial baseline testing, and about 7 or 8% of the inmates were high at the time we did that initial testing back in '95. We started implementing the program, and within a couple years, we got the percentage, the random percentage, down to about 1 to 2%. And then we kept refining what we were doing, and we kept working on it. And the last 10 years I was there, it varied between 0.2 and 0.3% over time, which means that largely the drugs were out of the system. We still occasionally got beat, occasionally some things came in, but generally we had it out. And not only did we see the random positive rates go down, but even though we increased the searching we were doing, we were finding less drugs in the system because it wasn't getting in. We also saw violence go down. Assaults on staff, assaults on inmates went down, fights went down, and general rules violations went down as well. And they stayed down during the course of time that I was there. So we basically know this can happen, that we can successfully do it. This is a bigger system, it's a more complex system, it's going to take a little longer, it's going to be a harder job, but using some of the same tools that we used in Pennsylvania, we can have an impact and can do it here as well. Now, what have we done here is we did receive $5.2 million last year, and we selected 11 institutions to begin rolling a program out. And we took 3 of those institutions and we did it on an intensive basis to do everything that we could think of getting the drugs out. And then we had the other 8 were a more moderate thing. And we did it for a couple reasons. Number one, I wanted to affect more than just a handful of institutions because this problem is a serious problem. We got to move forward on it. And the second reason is I wanted to see, is there a difference between a moderate approach and the more intensive approach? Because if you're getting almost the same amount out of a moderate approach, then let's roll that out everywhere, and let's not maybe do the intensive everywhere. But if the intensive makes a difference, then let's do that. So far, we have rolled out the ion scan machines in 8 of the institutions, 8 of the 11. We're doing it slowly, making sure as we move through that staff understand, that visitors understand, that everybody's aware of what's going on. And so we have the 3 intensive institutions at Calapat, Solano, and Lancaster. They're up and running, and things are going well there. And we've just started in 5 of the moderate institutions, SATF, Centinela, CIM, CCWF, and Salinas. And the other 3, which are Kern Valley, High Desert, and SCC, will be coming online in the next couple months. So far, we have not had any backlog. We have a randomizer that people hit, and if you get randomly selected, then you get the testing done on the ion scan machine. And that ion scan machine is the same thing that if you fly and go through the airport and get randomly selected and they swab your hands, it's the same machine that TSA uses. And it's the same machine we've been using for 20 years, though I think the technology is better today than it was 20 years ago. So it's the very same machine that's being used widely around the country. And you get your hand swabbed, and if everything's fine, then you just go on into the institution. If it's not, then with visitors, they get a non-contact visit, or they can leave if they want to. And at least currently, they can opt for an unclothed body search or a strip search that the senator mentioned. So far, I've been told we're not having any issues. We have been dealing with the inmate family councils. We continue to talk with the unions. I'm not aware of any major issue that we're having in any of the institutions. We actually started with staff before we started with inmates, because we started, I think, the week before Thanksgiving at Solano with them, and we started inmates the week after Thanksgiving because we didn't want to disrupt the Thanksgiving Day weekends. So everybody that's coming in is subject to that search. As far as the dogs, We have two types of dogs. We have, first of all, what you call the aggressive alert or assertive alert dogs. These are typically the Malamutes and the Shepherds. They're the scary dogs that people get scared of. And that's what we had when I got here. They had 20-some of them when I got here, and they didn't have any of the other types of dogs. Since I've gotten here, we have moved not totally away from the assertive dogs, because they can search vehicles and they can search common areas and cells, and they also look for cell phones. But we have moved to what we call the passive alert dogs, and they're different in both the type of dog, because they're labs and German short-hair Springers that are not scary dogs. And I remember when we rolled them out in the mid-2000s in Pennsylvania, I expected we'd get a lot of complaints, and we got no complaints. And the kids liked the dogs. They were friendly dogs. And that's what we're trying to do here as well. The dogs are friendly dogs. And those are the dogs are trained for a passive alert rather than rooting out the drug. What they'll do if they encounter drugs is they'll sit down and tell you there's a drug in that area. Again, we used them probably for about 10 years in Pennsylvania. We've had no issues, at least during the 5 years I was there. I can't speak to the last 5 years, but I'm not aware of any issues that they've had with them. We have not used any dogs on people yet. The first class of people dogs have just been trained. They started getting trained about 2 weeks ago, and they're in training right now. And when we first roll them out, we'll probably start using them on inmates first, and then eventually, at some point, April or May, we may start using them on visitors once we're comfortable. And what you do with these passive dogs is you actually get them, you train them for passive alert. You work with them for 5 or 6 months. You make sure you're really comfortable with the dog. Then you train them to work with people. And then you move ahead with that. So that, again, it's something you take it very slow. You don't want to have any problems. We don't want to scare anyone. So I think the whole thing is that we are moving ahead, and we're moving ahead very slowly with getting this out. It's difficult to say what impact we've had because we've just started putting the ion scan machines out there. We have not yet started using the dogs for people alert, and we still have some equipment on order. You know, with the procurement system, it takes time sometimes to get this because there's other things that we wanted, like X-ray machines for some of the intensive institutions, like you have here in the Capitol, to run bags through that come in. We want some equipment to help us do a better job with monitoring our minimum support facilities, because we know that's how some of the drugs get in, and so we're still waiting for some of that equipment. And so we don't have everything, and we probably won't have everything in place until April or May. And so with that being said, it's probably going to be difficult to really start giving good information about what is the impact of this until we get into later this year and maybe even into next year. It didn't happen overnight in Pennsylvania. It's not going to happen overnight here. We also are looking at the full body scanners that you're probably familiar with that TSA has. We didn't start with them initially because they're very expensive, but they would answer a lot of the questions that people raise, and so we are trying to get 3 of those on a leased basis into the 3 intensive institutions, try them, see how they work, and then maybe if we find that those are the way we should be going, maybe come back to you and ask for some money to go in that direction. But I need some information before I can do that and see if that's really going to do it. So this is a pilot, as was mentioned by the Senator. We are going to be continually reviewing what we're doing and reviewing the regs. I'm happy for this opportunity. I look forward to hearing what questions and concerns that you may have and other comments that might be made, because I think it'll help inform us as we move ahead and as we try to make this program the best that we can make it for this state to accomplish the tasks that we want to accomplish. So again, thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Secretary Beard. I'm sure that members of the committee will have questions. I just have one question to start, and that is about how we're going to evaluate the pilot. Because I think we agree that there is a problem. We would like to fix it. It would make for safer prisons. It would make for more rehabilitation, stabilize and turn back the growth in our prison population, so we want to be there. But we also need to get beyond anecdote to some really hard numbers, and I really appreciate the baseline information the department gave us on what has been collected now under the existing system in terms of drugs and cell phones. But so as we evaluate the pilot, I assume that we would continue collecting the numbers, the amounts of drugs, the numbers of cell phones, and also the origination, whether they're staff introduced into the prisons or visitor introduced or where they come from. Are we also going to collect information on prison conditions? Because you indicated initially that it's one of the reasons we do this is because of the number of lockdowns, uses of force, assaults, suicides, and other conditions in our prison. So I assume we would want to be collecting that information. And then also, will the evaluation be done by an outside group like the National Institute of Corrections that did a number of the other evaluations of what other states have done?
Well, Senator, first of all, we'll be collecting all of the information that you mentioned, and we'll be looking at what happens with the ion scan machines and the positive percentages we get there. I expect them to go down as it becomes more difficult for as it becomes more difficult for people to get drugs in. We'll be looking at what we find, and hopefully the fines will go down, because if we're starting to stop this stuff, then we'll find less in the prison system. You know, we will also be looking at all of the other things. We already have records of what our lockdowns are, our modified programs are. We know the number of suicides and homicides. We know the number of overdose deaths. We know the assaults and the things that interfere with operations of our institutions. All of that will be monitored. Even our rules violations will be monitored to see what, if any, of those things come down as we progress through this. So we will be collecting a wide range of data. As far as having an outside person do it, we really hadn't given thought to that, but I don't have any personal problem with that. And, you know, we certainly can take a look at that. I think if we're going to do that, we're going to have to wait at least a year or more after we have everything rolled out, so that we really have something for people to look at. In the interim, we'll continue to look at all of this, but if we want to really have an outside person, I think we've got to wait until we have some time under our belt here.
Okay, I think that could be helpful, just because the NIC analysis of California in the early days, 2000, 2002, when we actually were part of a pilot project that got evaluated by NIC on exactly the same issue. And it would also be good to know how what we're doing now is different from the program that was evaluated in 2002.
Yeah, there was substantial differences. I'm familiar with that study, and they didn't make near the comprehensive attempt that we're making now.
Okay. And then I'm also interested in the outcomes here. In that, what are the penalties and what happens when an inmate, for example, is found to be high? This is work that we do now, random urine analysis, as I understand it. Do they get a 115? Do they lose credits permanently? Do they go to administrative segregation? Do they go to treatment? And what is the availability of treatment for inmates that need it? And I'm asking this because I know that in the National Institute of Justice evaluation of Pennsylvania, they say that although interdiction was important, all inmates also undergo an evaluation to see if they need substance abuse treatment and presumably get it. And so I think that's an important piece of what we have to look at here too.
Well, first of all, to answer what happens to the inmate the first time they get caught with a positive urine, they lose work credits for 60 days. In other words, they lose their pay for 60 days. They can continue to work, but they lose their pay for 60 days. They're referred to an NA or an AA program or an other treatment program.
What's an NA program? I'm
A
sorry.
Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, or an actual substance abuse treatment program if it's available, because it currently isn't available in every prison. It will be by the end of this budget year. So they're referred to that. If it's a second time, there's a 180-day loss of pay and a referral to a treatment program. And a third time, they can lose their job for a year. So they don't lose the job until the third time, but then if they continue to use it, they can do that. There is also a loss of credit because there is an RVR involved, and it's a 60 to 90-day loss of credit for each event. Those credits, I believe, are restorable. And if they go through the treatment program and complete it or attend the AA and NA program, all they would have to do then is ask for the credit back, and they should get restored. And that's one of the things we've been talking about, strengthening in the regulations to make it clear that the credit can be restored once they complete the treatment program. You know, I mean, that's basically what happens right now, but we're looking at ways to strengthen that. Now, what you should be aware is that even though we will have substance abuse treatment programs in all of the institutions, we will not have them on all of the yards. And some institutions have the sensitive needs yards and a general population yard at the same thing. So if you have a program on one, they can't attend it in the other one. So we're going to eventually need more programming. In Pennsylvania, we didn't have enough in the beginning either back in 1995, but we built our substance abuse programs. When I left there, every institution had a full therapeutic community and intensive outpatient and outpatient treatment available everywhere, so everybody could get programming there. Not in the beginning, but we built it. That's where we're at here. So we'll have some, we'll be able to get some people in it now, but we're going to have to continue to build it to get there so that everybody will be able to get the programming. In the interim, AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous, and Narcotics Anonymous, I believe, is available in all of our institutions. So that should be available for them at a basic minimum.
Right, and that's good, but as we know, it's not substance abuse treatment. So I appreciate very much the fact that you want to have it available for all the inmates that need it. I think that is a key piece also to be an incentive as well as, you know, the deterrence that we're putting in. So we will probably want to know more about this at budget time. Let me put, and I appreciate your doing that. And I also appreciate the fact that you're willing to restore credits if there's successful program completion. And that's another reason why there ought to be enough program so that it can be completed. And I'm, you know, so thank you for making that commitment. I think that's going to be important. Now, is any of the $5.5 million going towards increasing substance abuse treatment, or is it only for the interdiction pieces right now?
That monies all went towards the interdiction. We had other monies already out there to roll out substance abuse programs in all of the institutions that did not have the reentry hubs. So our reentry hub institutions had substance abuse. Now we're rolling it out everywhere else. That'll be in place by July 1. But again, not available to everybody. But we have to remember, I mean, we didn't ask for more money for substance abuse this year because you can't just roll these out overnight. It takes time, and there's not people in the community that, a lot of these are done under contract, and so we want to do them right. We don't want to just start a program to start a program. So I think maybe in the fall, we might be looking at you know, you know, a BCP or something for more substance abuse. I think that would be a reasonable time. We'll have these programs rolled out and see where the holes still are, and perhaps come back at that point and ask for more.